Thanks to the U.S. domestic vaccine campaign, cases here continue to drop. But this success prompts further reflection on why more than 500,000 Americans died and why the initial response failed to contain the virus more effectively. A new book tells the story of a few people who tried to steer this country on a different path. William Brangham is back for the latest from our NewsHour bookshelf.
That's right. There were a handful of researchers, scientists, and public health officials who seemed to have an early, prescient understanding of how bad this pandemic would hit the United States and what we could do to avert it. Michael Lewis's new book, The Premonition, tells the story of this unusual group and how they tried their very best to get those in positions of power to listen and to respond. Michael Lewis, great to have you back on the NewsHour. As I mentioned, this book focuses on this small, unusual, secretive group in some ways who, as your title suggests, were able to see what seemingly many in the government were not able to see. Tell us a little bit, who were these people and what is it that they were seeing?
At the center of it, is a local public health officer named Charity Dean. And they're the ignored characters of this pandemic because they're the ones who have been fighting disease on the ground forever. And she'd seen firsthand that we were ill-equipped. In particular, the CDC was ill-equipped to actually engage when the shooting started. And one of the other characters, Carter Mesher, actually is one of the authors of the U.S. pandemic plan that was written during the Bush administration. And in the course of his work, developed a kind of preternatural ability to track pandemic disease, to anticipate it. And both of these characters, by kind of mid-late January, knew what we were dealing with. They knew the severity and they knew the transmissibility of it, and they knew what was coming, and had some trouble getting people to listen to them.
Yeah, there are all of these remarkable scenes in the book where these people, through these different back channels, trying to convince members of the CDC or HHS or the White House COVID task force to act. What is your sense, what is their sense of why that message didn't get through?
Or for that matter, the state of California. Charity Dean, who's working for it, is forbidden from using the word pandemic in January or February. And I think there's a couple of things going on. One is that it's the nature of the threat, that it's an invisible threat. And until you actually kind of see it sickening people around you, you don't believe it. It's a kind of theoretical thing. And the problem is, as they all point out, with this particular threat, you have to be almost clairvoyant because by the time you see the illness, you're way behind the disease. The other part of it is, I think, just generally just the tools, our government tools that we have to manage existential risks have been allowed to corrode. That we've become kind of complacent, and so that when you have a sense that your tools might not work, maybe you're a little slower to use them.
The CDC in particular comes under a good deal of criticism in this book. What is your sense? What is the main assessment of how the CDC stumbled in this pandemic?
Yeah, and it's not my criticism. You just follow these characters in the story. When there's a risk of being wrong, the CDC stands back, doesn't engage in the battle. And the problem is it is a battle, and the decisions that get made in the course of disease are ones that happen under conditions of uncertainty, if they're going to be effective. And the institution has been politicized. It's kind of a little to the point where Charity Dean, when she's a Santa Barbara County local health official, bans them from her investigations. It slows her down. I think the bigger message is how we manage ourselves, that we have allowed that institution to drift over a course of a couple of generations from a really well-run, proud institution filled with public servants and run by public servants to one that's managed at the top by political appointees who are there for short periods of time and who are on a very short lease from the political process. And the way we punish people for being wrong, even if the process that got them to the decision is right, has led us to a situation where the people at the top are kind of terrified of being wrong.
The characters in your book clearly do believe that if some of their warnings and their actions had been heeded, that this pandemic would have looked very different for the United States. I wonder, though, do you think that American society writ large would have accepted some of their recommendations? Because some of them are fairly extreme and severe. Do you think they could have implemented what they wanted to do if they'd been given the power to do so?
So this is a great question. And the question is the society willing to be led and unified? Because that's what would have been required. And it's hard to know, right? My feeling is that it was, yes, possible. And the reason I think it was possible is if it had been led properly, it would have only taken 6 weeks or so before the country saw, oh my God, we dodged that bullet. Now, even if that's not true, even if for strange, bizarre cultural reasons we were incapable of containing the virus, if we had just mitigated it better, if we'd just been as good as the average G7 country, there'd be 200,000 Americans alive today that are not. So that's the sin. It's sort of like, all right, maybe it wasn't possible to do what Australia did and really stamp it out and control it. Maybe that's not possible for us, but it was possible to do a lot better. And we did not do it. We didn't do ourselves proud here. And it really should be a gut check moment for the culture.
Do you think when this is all said and done that we will heed some of the lessons of the missteps that we made? Or do you think that we'll be so eager to put this behind us that we'll put those lessons behind us too?
I think the trauma that the society has suffered is enough that people will have had enough. I'm very hopeful. I think that we're sort of like a really talented team that has had a really crappy season. And the question is like, why? It isn't the talent of the players. We have the capacity. If we didn't have the capacity, I'd say, maybe we're in trouble the next time. But I do think that like no one wants to relive this. And certainly no one wants to relive this, maybe worse. I mean, you replay this with it killing children or being more lethal. Nobody wants that. And so I think that it will be messy because we're a polarized country and people want to, like a losing team, people want to point fingers rather than fix the problem. But I think at bottom, America doesn't want to lose. You know, I think at bottom, we want to win. And I think we're going to figure out a way to do it.
All right. The book is called The Premonition, A Pandemic Story. Michael Lewis, always great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
This kind of journalism matters so much. Thank you, Michael Lewis, and thank you, William.